Now, in the previous lesson, we created our NFT actor class, and we saw that we were able to mint brand new NFTs simply by passing in data for the name, the owner, and the actual image data to this canister. But of course, when we called these methods on the command line and when we got the results back, the name and the owner are easy enough to read, but the actual image, unless we're some sort of human computer, this is completely not understandable. So let's try and get this to render on our front end and to be displayed on our website. So far, we haven't really activated our front end. We haven't actually seen what it looks like. First, let's go ahead and do that. We need to run our npm server. So let's go ahead and do npm start. And once that's up, we should be able to head over to localhost 8080 and it should show us our homepage. So here we've got a header, we've got a footer, and we've got this image as our main homepage background with all of the crypto dunks that I've created for you for this project. If we go ahead and click on anything on the website, nothing is working right now. So what we want to do first of all is to replace this home image with the image that we actually uploaded when we used the command line code in our README to deploy and mint this NFT. So we want to see what this image actually looks like. So to do that, we're going to head into our app component and we're going to comment out our home image and replace it with the item component. And as you type, it should start auto-suggesting this item component. And if you select it and hit enter, it will automatically add the imports for you, which will save you a little bit of headache and a little bit of potential for spelling mistakes. Once we've done that, then we're going to head over into our item component and just quickly take a look at it. And I've kept the HTML relatively simple. It's just going to display the image, the name, and the owner. And all of this is formatted in a card-like structure. So if we hit save and go over to our local host and hit refresh, you should be able to see it rendered on screen. Now, don't worry about the layout and the centering. We're going to deal with that a little bit later on. But right now, what we're interested in is to replace these pieces of hard-coded data, including the image, which currently is just pulling our logo, to the actual image and name and owner that we passed in when we created and minted our NFT. So all of this. In order to do that, we're going to pass in the ID of our canister as a prop to this component. If you go ahead and split off another terminal and run dfx canister ID and then the name of our canister, which is called NFT, then it will output the ID of our canister. Once we've done that, let's go ahead and copy it, and we're going to paste it into our app component. So here I'm going to create a new constant, which I'll call the NFT ID, and I'm going to set it as that string that I just copied from the command line. Now I'm going to pass that in as the prop. So I'm going to call this simply just the ID, and then I'm going to pass in this NFT ID as the prop. That means over here in our item, we can tap into our props and we can get hold of our ID by simply calling props.id. Now we're going to use that a little bit later on in order to access that canister and to call the methods on that canister, including getName, getOwner, and getAsset. But in order to be able to access that canister, we have to run a HTTP command to use Hypertext Transfer Protocol to fetch that canister on the Internet Computer blockchain. In terms of working locally, that will be our local DFX. So let's set this up by creating a new const, which I'll call localhost. And I'm going to set this up as the URL of our local host. So I'll just copy and paste it in here. And then we're going to create a new HTTP agent. So I'll just call it agent. And this comes from an agent package that we installed when we initialized our project. So this comes from Dfinity, and it's there to help us run HTTP requests in order to get hold of canisters. So the class is called HTTP agent, and it's a capital H and lowercase TTP, and then it's agent. And in order to use this, we of course have to import it. The import statement, be really careful not to make any typos because it's really easy. Just take a look at what I'm writing. It's again capital H, capital A, HTTP agent, and from is going to be from at Dfinity. Again, another big potential for error. So it's DFINITY and then / agent. Now we can use that to create a new agent. So the syntax is const agent equals new HTTP agent. And then we have to provide some initializers in the form of a JavaScript object. And this is where we're going to pass our local host that we constructed earlier on as the host property. Basically, we're going to create a new HTTP agent, which is going to make requests, and it's going to use the local host. Now, the next thing we're going to do is to use this agent to fetch our name, owner, and image. In order to call the methods on our canister, because they all return asynchronously, that means we have to make these method calls inside an async function as well. So I'm going to create a new async function, which I'm going to call load NFT. And inside this method, I'm going to use the agent to get hold of our NFT canister, which, if you remember, is called an actor. So let's create a const called our NFT actor. And this is going to be created through using an await and the actor class from the Dfinity agent. So it's await actor dot create actor, and inside here we have to pass in two inputs. The first input is going to be an IDL factory. So the IDL factory lives inside the declarations folder, and we want to pass over the IDL factory for our NFT canister. So if you take a look inside nft.did.js, you can see that here the IDL factory is being created and exported. And what it basically does is it gives our front end a translated version of our Motoko backend so that our JavaScript will know which method can be called in our NFT canister. There's getAsset, getName, and getOwner, and also what inputs are expected and what outputs will be returned. It's basically like a translator between our Motoko code and our JavaScript code. We need to import this IDL factory and pass it in when we create our actor. We're going to say import IDL factory from, and then we have to go up a few steps. So 3 of these .. and then go to declarations and then go to the NFT declarations like so. And let's just check to make sure that we haven't made any typos. It's in capital F, but lowercase ID and L. Okay, so now that we've got that, let's go ahead and create our actor by passing in that IDL factory. And then the second input here will be any options. So the agent options and the actor options. We're going to pass in the agent as the agent that we constructed up here, our new HTTP agent. And then we're going to pass in our canister ID as the one that we got from our props. So we got it right here. Now, because this is a piece of plain text, as you can see here, that's just what's passed over, we have to turn this into an actual principal type. So we've done this plenty of times before. We have to first import the principal type from the Dfinity module that we installed. And then we use the principal.fromText method and wrap our props.id into that method And if there are no typos, then we should be able to pass that in as our canister ID. So now is a question of, when do we actually load our NFT? When do we want to call this method? Well, if you think about it, we only really want to call this once, and that's the first time this item component gets rendered. So that should ring some bells. And the reason why I say that is because we've used this before. We want to use the useEffect hook to pass in a JavaScript fat arrow function. That's all it is, right? So inputs, fat arrow, and then the body. And then we want to add a comma after that first input and add our second input, which is going to be an empty array, because this is what's monitored to see how many times the function in useEffect should be called. And if we leave it empty, then that means it's only going to be called the first time this component gets rendered. So now let's think about what to put inside this function. And in our case, it's going to be to call the load NFT method that we created right here. Now that we've got pretty much all the setup done, the next step is to actually grab hold of the pieces of data that we want from this NFT canister. If we go ahead and say NFT actor dot, then we can call any of the methods that's inside this NFT actor. So we can call getName, getOwner, and getAsset. So I'm going to start from the top. I'm going to call the getName method. And remember, because this is asynchronous, we have to use the await keyword in front of it. And then I'm going to save it inside a const called name. Once this name comes back, I want to use it to update my HTML. So that instead of this hard-coded text here, I want to be able to pass it in as a React state variable. So I'm going to call it the name, and it's crossed out because it doesn't exist right now. So let's go ahead and create it. And we're going to be using our use hooks that you've seen plenty of times now. So it's going to be name and set name. And it's going to use state. And if we select it and hit enter, then it will automatically import it to this line here. And we're going to say that the starting state will just be nothing. It'll be undefined. Once we've got this from our NFTActor.getName, then let's go ahead and call setName and pass it the result of this method call. Now let's go ahead and hit save and take a look at our front end, and you should find that our name has now been replaced from the previous, which I think was 321, to now 123, which comes from that line in our README when we initialized this new CryptoDunk. Now I want you to go ahead and try to do the same thing for the user ID. Remember though that in order for it to go in here, it should be in text format, whereas what you'll receive from the NFT canister will be the principal format. So just keep in mind that fact while you complete this challenge. So try to do everything that we did for the name of the NFT, but do it this time for the owner. Pause the video and try to make this owner update to the actual owner ID of the NFT. All right, as we did before, we're going to create a new const, which I'll call owner, and then we're going to use await to call on our NFT actor and call the method getOwner. At least I think that's what it's called. Let's just make sure that we didn't make any typos here, because the IDE tooling for Matoku is not that great. It's not going to auto-suggest it or auto-fill it for us. But once we got hold of that, we're going to call on a method that doesn't exist yet called setOwner and pass in the owner. So it doesn't exist because we haven't created it. I'm going to create it right here. So owner and setOwner. And again, I'm going to start it off with an undefined state. So now let's replace this part with what's inside our owner. And as I said, remember that this will come back as a principal data type. So in order to get it into an actual text format when we want to set it, what you have to do is to use the method toText, which comes from that principal import. And we've done this before, so you should have seen this already, but it's going to convert that principal data type into a text data type, which can then be used by JavaScript to insert in here. So let's hit save and let's check it out. And if yours is as long as mine, then it probably means that you've got it set up correctly. Now, the last thing we have to update is the image, which is a little bit tricky, so we're going to do it together. And in order to get the image to display, we have to convert that image byte, which currently is in a format of an array of 8-bit numbers, into something that can be read as a URL by our image element here. So we have to set the source here. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a new constant, which I'm going to call image data. And this is going to come from our await NFT actor.getAsset. And that's going to call this method here, returning to us this array of 8-bit numbers. And in order to get that to be recognizable by JavaScript, we have to convert it into what's called a uint8 array. We can do that through using the new uint8 array. And I'm not going to type it out, I'm just going to hit enter and get it to auto insert just to make sure I don't make any typos there. And I'm going to pass in our image data that we got back from our backend in order to convert it into this format that can be read by JavaScript. So I'll save that into another constant, which I'll call image content. And finally, we're going to turn that image content into an actual URL. So let's create a new const, which I'll call image, and we're going to use the url.createObjectURL in order to convert our image content into an actual object URL that can be used on the front end. This is going to be url.createObjectURL, and we're going to pass in our image content as a blob data type. The blob objects are this kind of really easy data type that can be converted from many different formats. We're actually converting an array of NAT8 numbers from our backend that's stored on the Internet Computer blockchain into something that can be read by JavaScript. Now here we need to create a new blob. The syntax for creating a blob is to simply pass in an array, and optionally you can pass in some options such as the data type that's stored in the blob. And there are some examples on how to create a blob on the Mozilla developer docs. So let's go ahead and try to use this format to create our blob. So we're going to say new blob, and then we're going to pass in an array. So open up some square brackets. We're going to pass in our image content, and we're going to use .buffer to turn it into an array buffer. And then we're going to pass in some options. We're going to open up some curly braces and use the type key to specify that these are going to be image/PNGs. So now let's hit save and let's go ahead and set our image. So set image to image, and let's add that up here. So const image set image equals uState, and again setting it to empty. And now down here in our image HTML, we'll replace our logo with that image that we created. So let's hit save and let's go over to our OpenD, and you can see here is our entire NFT item. And for the first time, you can actually visualize the NFT as an image. That's pretty cool. We've got our name, we've got our owner, and we've got the image displayed on screen. So now that we've seen how we can mint an NFT and display our NFT, The next step is to be able to allow our users to mint their NFTs by uploading an image to our OpenD website. So for all of that and more, I'll see you on the next lesson.